we're going to jump into it like we do every week. Welcome to another episode of the Bladeology podcast. We are on this week with episode 44. We are on with our original host lineup, and we're on with a guest. This is the vocal representation of Jeremiah Burbank from PVK Vegas,
Nick Chuperin of NCC Knives,
and Elijah Isham of Isham Blade-Works.
Awesome. And we are joined tonight by the infamous and the famous Mike Norris. Mike, how are you doing tonight?
Doing great. How are you guys?
We're doing awesome. I'm going to thank you for taking some time to come on tonight and talk with us.
Glad to do it. Glad to be here.
All right, so let's get right into it, man. Let's jump in. So you are definitely most famously known for some pretty awesome and amazing pattern Damascus. How did you get into this wild world of Damascus and knife making? Tell us about it.
Well, I started my knife making career in 1982. I made my first knife then. I actually paid a visit to my dad. I was 28 years old, I guess. Went by to see my dad, who had retired, and I noticed that he was out in his shop making some little kitchen knives out of crosscut saw blades, putting oak handles on them and using nails and washers for rivets. And I was just kind of intrigued by it, and I thought, well, I asked him, I said, would you mind if I make me a hunting knife? And he said, no, go ahead. So I made a hunting knife out of a crosscut saw blade, and you know, of course, it was very crude. Had never heard of a custom knife maker at that time. You know, never knew there was such a thing. So, but I was intrigued because I've always liked working with metal. Because I was a welder for many years. I always liked working with metal, and I always liked working with wood. So I said, I think I'll make some more of these. So that's kind of what started. And I made a few more out of saw blades, and I found some circular saw blades that were from a sawmill that were thicker. You know, and of course, I'm using saw blade steel, which is normally L6 at that time, and that particular steel doesn't hold an edge very well, you know, not real well. So I kept experimenting and doing different things and reheat treating myself in an old coal forge that I built. And I did that for about 3 months. And I was in a bookstore one day, and I happened to see a book called Gun Digest Book of Knives. So I picked the book up and started flipping through the pages, and I started looking at some really nice knives in there. And I started, I was kind of glancing and reading, and I realized that I was looking at handmade knives. And I thought, these knives look a lot different than mine. But, I said, I gotta check this out. So I bought the book. I took it home and I read it from cover to cover and looked at every picture in it. And I said, I can do that. So I started buying some equipment and making knives in my spare time, which was all of my spare time after work. And that within about, well, that actually started. That was 1982. So then I started making knives stock removal by the stock removal process. Basically, left the forging alone. Started using 154 CM and other steels, but mostly 154 CM at the time. And from there, I ended up in 1986 joining the Knife Makers Guild, and just made knives. Actually, part-time, went full-time in 1993 after I met my wife. And we got married, and I decided I didn't want to run all over the country doing construction work anymore. Um, so I went full time, and from 93 to 95, I was full time as a knife maker. And then as I would go to shows, I'd see a lot of Damascus, but I wasn't really. Damascus just didn't impress me for some reason. Didn't have any desire to make any knives out of Damascus, or to much less forge any Damascus. But during that couple of years that I was actually full time, I had a guy commission me to make some knives for him, and he was providing the steel, and they were all Damascus. Well, he was providing a lot of the steel he was providing was made by Devin Thomas, and that steel really intrigued me because it was stainless, and you didn't have the rust problems, and it was just intriguing to me. So Devin Thomas was my inspiration. He's the one that inspired me to do, to get started in forging stainless. So in 95, I was at a show in the spring in, I think, Secaucus, New Jersey. And I was talking to some other makers. We were talking about stainless Damascus, and I had been thinking about it and pondering it for quite a while. I turned to my wife and I said, "You know what? I'm going to start making stainless Damascus."
Bam.
She said, "Okay." So I went home. Let's see, that show was in the spring. So I go home and I start working on I knew nothing about forging. Okay. Except what little bit I had seen, and maybe some a video here and there, but very little. I think I had been to one forging demonstration and went with a friend and wasn't really interested, just went with a friend. So I knew very little about forging. So I had to scramble to find all the information I could. So I opted to go with a hydraulic press because of where my shop was. I couldn't put a trip hammer in there. So I built a forge, and I built a hydraulic press. And let's see, the guild show was in July, I think. And by the time the guild show came around, I had 4 knives made out of stainless Damascus and 4 billets of steel for sale.
Oh, wow.
At the show. So I ended up winning the Barretto Award for Outstanding Achievement at the guild show that year. And that kind of started it. Whenever people would come around the show, other knife makers, we would get together and talk, or swing by each other's table and talk. They would look at my steel and they'd say, they would ask, "Whose steel is that?" And I'd say, "It's mine. I made it." And they go, "Is it stainless?" And I said, "Yeah." They'd say, "Would you make it for somebody else?" And I'd say, "Well, yeah, sure." So that's how it got started. And within 2 years, I was so busy making stainless Damascus that I basically had to quit making knives.
Oh, wow. Okay. So that caught on real quick then.
So that's pretty much how it got started. Yeah, it did. And that was just, at that time, there was just me and...
Yeah, if Damascus is selling more than knives, might as well.
Yeah. At that time, it was just me and Devin were the only one.
Yes, I was back then. It was just the YouTube, because stainless steel is still pretty new. Even now, there's not really. I can still count the guys making stainless Damascus on one hand, for mass sale.
Yeah.
This is way before Dam Steel, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Oh
yeah.
yeah.
So that's
way before Dam Steel.
So it was just you, and it was just Devin. There were 2 guys at that time doing this.
Yes.
So how did
you? Yes, actually, for many years, it was just me and him.
Right. So tell us a little bit about that. So you're saying back then, give us sort of an idea of what was available for I mean, stainless Damascus, but most of it was carbon before then, and a lot of it wasn't patterned. Like you were saying, you saw Devin's work. A lot of it wasn't patterned like your steel was, right?
Correct. Well, actually, my steel wasn't patterned like my steel is now.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go.
You know, it's taken many years to get to this point. You know, I started out making a basic random, a ladder, and a raindrop. And you know, the thing about stainless is it's every time you can't draw it out and cut it and fold it and flux it and just keep going. You know, every step you've got to cut it into pieces, regrind it. If you do multiple welds, you got to cut it into pieces. You got to grind the pieces. You got to restack them. You got to recant them or rewrap them. That's another thing. I don't use a can, but I'll talk about that later. But you gotta. I mean, every time you do another weld, to get more complex patterns, you've got to go through that. You've got to anneal it, grind it, and restack it. So it takes so long, and it's so time consuming for some of the patterns. Even the annealing process is not. You got to go through that, and it can be time consuming. So there's a lot of work in it, and when I first started, I thought, I kept thinking of different patterns, and I thought, well, everything I do is going to increase the time so much, nobody's going to be able to afford it, So I kind of stuck with those basic patterns for several years until I just got bored with it and said, I've got to try something different. It's no matter how long it takes, I got to do it. I just got to try some different stuff. So I started experimenting on the patterns and ended up creating some really nice patterns. I will say this: I made a lot more money when I had 3 basic patterns because things went a lot quicker. Now, some of my patterns are complex enough that there's so many steps to it. It really gets time consuming, and I really don't charge comparable to the time. Some of it is kind of expensive, but it's really not as expensive as it should be if I got paid for my time.
Yeah, people don't realize that some of the Sanmai you make, it's not like carbon Damascus. When you're making Sanmai Damascus and stainless, he has to make a billet, cut it in half, and then re-stack and weld it. And you have to clean up all 3. You have to make a piece of Damascus, cut that in half, clean that up again, and then get a piece of steel, clean that up, then re-weld it. Now, I'm not familiar with your method. When I've made stainless Damascus in the past, I did a can. So I didn't do Sanmai for that reason. I was like, I have to do this again and then make a can again to re-weld this. And I didn't have time for that. But that was the plan until I realized, this is more than double the work at that point just to make it Sanmai.
Oh, yes. When I first started making Sanmai, it was probably 20 years ago. And I used some of the powdered steels for S30V for the core. But what I did was stacked a thick enough piece of the S30V or whatever I used for the core. I stacked a thick enough piece in the billet so that when I drew it down and got ready to pattern, I could pattern it and still keep all of the S30V or the core material in the center. Now you would have a wavy core. I mean, it would be wavy, but I tried to shoot for having all of that material on the core or on the cutting edge.
Did that work out for you?
Well, it did, and but you're limited to the patterns that you do. Otherwise, your core is going to be all over the place. And one of my thing is, if I'm going to make Sanmai, I want the core to be in the center. When somebody grinds that blade, I want to see core on both sides, and I want it to be in the center. I want it to be as close to to centered as possible. So by making San Mai in that way, you're kind of limited at how good you can get it. Now I've managed to do pretty good, but you've got to. The thing about the grinding process is what a lot of people don't take into account. After you forge a billet and get it patterned, and when you grind it, you grind it down to all clean material. If that billet is warped any at all, if it's not good and straight when you start grinding, and of course they always are, they're never straight. They're never perfectly straight. So when you start grinding it, I actually have to shim it from time to time to make sure the core stays the same. For instance, if I'm grinding a billet and it happens to be cleaning up on say on one end, but it's not cleaning up on the other end, I still got dimples in it from my patterning process, then I have to shim that end to get it up to where it's grinding even. If I don't, my core's going to be off. So I spend so much time in the grinding process that it was that's one reason why I really got really tired of making San Mai, because the grinding process was so meticulous, But I ended up just a couple of years ago. I always thought about the fact that I should be able to weld a core. Now I don't know. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago. I always wanted to take 2 pieces of Damascus and sandwich a core between it, but I was always afraid that you got one shot at welding stainless. If it doesn't weld on the first welding heat, then you're done. You're not going to salvage it. So I always thought, if I make a billet of Damascus, say I make an 18-inch billet of a particular pattern, and then I cut it in half, and then I sandwich those 2 together with a piece of XHP or whatever in the center, when I go to do the forge weld on it, if I lose it, I've just lost a whole billet of Damascus that I've made, because I didn't get it well. So eventually I decided that I had to try it, So yeah, I lost a few, and it hurt.
Break a couple.
It hurts when you. Oh yeah, it hurts when you spend all that time in a billet and you got it completely ground, ready to go, and then you cut it in half, and put it together like a sandwich, and then you lose it. I've done that. I did that a few times. I tried different methods. Had lots of problems with it, and gave up on it for a little while. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to try it again, because I really wanted to be able to produce a San Mai that had a straight core, that I wouldn't have to worry about. So when I grind it, when I put it on the blancher and I start grinding it, and I can grind the same amount off of both sides, and the core's going to be centered. And when it ships out to a maker and the maker starts grinding, he don't have to chase that core. I want a maker to be able to grind that blade and know that core is going to be in the center.
Yep.
So
I've used your material. It's pretty damn center. So
thank you. So anyway, I started making what I call the straight core stuff just a couple years ago. I actually found a process that works. It works really well. And I do basically make a billet of Damascus and cut it in half and sandwich it sandwich a piece of core material between it. Now I got a formula that I go by to get the right thickness core. And see, when I first started doing this and I got it to stick successfully and turned out some successful billets, my problem was, if you think about producing a piece of Damascus with a good pattern, but you've got to put 3 pieces together, which is going to make it thicker. You've got to forge weld those together, and then you got to draw them out. You got to draw it out and set it, enough that you're going to be down to the right thickness when you grind it. So you can't start out with very thick material, because if you draw it out, then your pattern is going to be drawn out. And your pattern, it turns out that some of the patterns actually look like crap after they've been, when you put them together and get it forged together, and then you, and I try to make my thickness to where I don't have very much forging left to do after they stick, after the layers are welded together. I don't want to have to draw it out very much at all. So that's the tricky part. So you have to go thinner, and when you go thinner, then you're more apt to lose it. So, but I have actually, and basically what happens when that pattern draws out, it starts stretching out, and it also begins to look grainy. When you etch it, it just don't have crisp lines, and you get just a little bit of that anyway. As opposed to just a regular billet that I would make.
Right.
But it's very little. I've got it to the point now that I get very little of that, and I end up with a straight core, and then now a lot of guys like the wavy core. They still like the wavy core. So I'm doing both, but I prefer to do it the second way. Now when I cut a billet of Damascus in two, and then I have to sandwich it and forge weld that, I end up with less material. So, I have to charge more. I mean, it's more work, obviously, but I also lose some material when I do that. So I usually charge 20% more than for that, for the straight core sandmi. I also charge 20% more for the wavy core sandmi because it takes so long to grind it.
It's just so sandmi in general is a huge pain, but it can be done, and it's expensive.
Oh yes.
Okay.
I've done a lot of it. A lot of it. I've had, when since it was pretty new process to me, and my first few pieces were not successful. If everything's not right, I mean, you can't get your welding heat can't be too hot. If it's too hot, then your pattern steel on the outside clad is going to look terrible. It's going to look grainy, and it's going to spread it out too bad. If it's not hot enough, it's not going to weld. So you got a very narrow window if you want it to look good and for it to weld.
What causes cracking?
What causes cracking?
Yeah.
You mean between the layers or?
No. So
cracking?
The first billet I made, I don't know if it was overheated or overworked. I would get cracks at the edges that are all the way through and will go about a half inch in. And those are just shear cut blanks. The second billet I made was way better. The cracks were only 1/8 of an inch, and that was about it. But what I did was it took a lot longer to prep, but I put the entire brick into the mill, and I faced them so they were exactly to the same size, and there was nothing at all.
Yeah.
So I didn't know if it was because the fit was a lot more perfect, or it was the heating that I did, or the overworking on the first billet.
It was more than likely. Well, let me ask you this: what did your cracks look like? I mean, were they uniform cracks, or did it look kind of sugary?
Sugary, but it's because it was performance stainless, so I was running 2 performance knife steels. It wasn't like a crack, but it's the decarb and the scale that kind of throws it off. That's what you mean by sugary?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. That is too much heat.
Okay, yeah. The second billet came out a lot better, and then my third billet was similar, and then the fourth billet came out better. I made 4 total 4-inch by 20-inch billets, and 3 of them are still sitting in the shop that need to be ground. And I finally got a surface grinder this week, so now I can actually grind them. But they've been sitting there for 3 years.
Oh yeah, yes. Usually, if it looks like what you're talking about, that's usually excessive heat, and it's beginning to crumble. In other words, the material has gotten to the point that it's just a little. It's almost hot enough to start, to become fluid. And the hammer, when when the hammer contacts it, it starts, causing it to just crumble. So less heat is what you need. What are the steels that you were welding together?
ABL and 154.
Yeah, it's the 154. Yeah.
Well, do you need more
the
synthetic
154.
and non-more synthetic to give contrast?
Yes. If you use the right acid, you can get a good contrast. Lost my train of thought.
You were saying it was probably the 154 that got over.
Yes, the 154 is red short. It will crumble a lot quicker than the AEBL. So anytime I forge 154, I have to drop my heat considerably, the welding heat and the forging heat. I've done a lot of CPM 154, and it's basically acts the same as the regular 154. It will crumble really quick. So now XHP holds the heat a little better.
And what are you cladding that with? ABL?
19C27.
So that'd be similar to like a Nitro V, if you're familiar with that.
Well, no, it's quite a bit different. 19C27 is basically, it's almost like 440C, but it has less chrome. It's a little tougher than 440C. Holds an edge really well. That's been my, when I first started making stainless Damascus, I opted to go with Udaholm's AEBH. Because of the carbon content. See, AEBL only has 65 points carbon. 19C27 has 95 points. The 19C27 also etches blacker. It turns darker. But but I used Udaholm's AEBH for a long time until they quit making it, and then I switched over to Sandvik's 19C27. I've been using Sandvik steel for almost 20 years now. Yeah, about 20 years probably.
So you mentioned the darkness in the patterns, and that reminded me of something, because the first time that I really was like entranced by a Damascus pattern was I think it was Fire Clone, and it was on a Protec Godfather. It was one of their shop customs, and I have to say that it was circa 2012, 2011, and it really it was the first Damascus I'd seen that really just I just got lost in the pattern. It was really it was an amazing pattern, and the way it was etched, it was so exactly like you're saying. It was so high contrast, so dark, that the Fire Clone pattern was just like, it's amazing. So I want to get into a little bit of this pattern making and sort of how you do that and the popularity of the patterns, because that really, for me, that was it. Like, I saw that and I was just like, that's the coolest pattern I have ever seen. Till this day, Hornets Nest is a close second, but Fire Clone is really like, that's what I look to when I think of Damascus.
I was just thinking of that. It's like a great name, Fire Clone.
Yeah, it's the pattern is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I came up with that name when I etched the first piece of it. I thought of Cyclone of Fire. That's where Fire Clone came from.
Okay, all right.
So, but anyway, almost anybody will tell you that when you're making stainless Damascus, well, anybody that makes it, if you'll notice, most people don't twist it. There's a reason for that. It's a pain in the butt. I mean, it is a pain. You got to do everything right, or you lose it when you start flattening it. And Fire Clone, of course, is a twisted pattern. When I first came up with the idea for that pattern and twisted it, and etched the first piece of it. Of course, I lost part of it, but I was so intrigued by the pattern. I said, "Man, this is really nice. I gotta make this work." So, took a lot of trial and error to figure out exactly. I mean, your temperature is critical when you're twisting it. Everything is so critical. And you know, if you don't get it right, when you start forging it flat, it will just split open on the edges. So anyway, I really liked the pattern, and I said, you know what, I got to make some more of this. But I said, nobody's going to buy it because it's going to be too expensive. Because I've got, if I'm going to make it, I've got to charge for it. This stuff right here is crazy. It was a pain. So anyway, I offered it. I put it out there and offered it for sale, you know. And I said, nobody's going to buy this stuff. It's too expensive. Well, next thing I know, it's one of my top sellers, you know.
Oh, wow.
Everybody seems to really love it. And I've come up with some numerous variations of it. Every now and then I'll just decide to do a little variation of it, and I'll send it to someone, and next thing I know, I'll see a picture of a knife made out of it, and people are asking about that one, you know. So I've got one now that's Cyclone 2, I call it. It's got XH, it's mostly XHP, but it's got some of the other stuff going on, you know, also. But when you look at it, it looks like, well, it's quite a bit different, but I enjoy trying different things. There's a lot of things that I would like to do that I just don't, because it's really going to increase my time, you know. And I think, well, nobody's going to be able to afford it. So, for instance, one of those things, if you'll notice, nobody out there makes Turkish twist in stainless.
Right. Yeah, that's
yeah. Well, I've done that too.
Oh man.
Alan Elishwitz asked me numerous times to make him some, and I said, no, there's no way. I said, I can't do it. I ain't gonna do it. I said, you don't. What a lot of people don't realize is that the amount of you need a lot of reduction before stainless actually welds good enough that you can start, you know, really working it. So to make Turkish twist, you can't, on your last weld, when you've got those twisted pieces stacked, you can't do a lot of reduction. You know, because you got to, your pattern's on the side. You got to slab your pattern off the side. So I kept telling him, and I said, no, I just ain't gonna do it. I said, there's no way. I'm not gonna attempt it. Well, I said that for years, and was talking to him one day about, I don't know, 4 years ago maybe, and he said, man, you've got to do the Turkish twist. And I said, well, all right, I'll try it.
Well, there we go.
So I did, and I've made some Turkish twist for him and several other people since then. Don't make it very often, and don't want to make it very often. But yeah, I have done the first. I lost the first piece, but after that, been able to make it work out successfully. My first successful piece. The second piece I did, I said, well, after I slabbed the piece off the side and got, you know, I looked at it and I said, pattern looks nice. So here's the test. I took that piece and laid it on my anvil and laid a block under one end of it and smacked it with my hammer. I said, if those welds are solid, it'll stay together. If they're not, it's going to come apart now. And I smacked it and bent it, and then bent it some more. And I said, well, stay together. So that's what I wanted. So.
There we go.
But I would not like to take an order for a lot of it. I can tell you that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's one of those like mythological Damascus patterns that nobody wants to do. It's impossible to get people to do it, and it just seems like technically just a huge amount of process involved to get everything to be right.
Yes.
So my following question is, how do I purchase some?
Yeah, right.
I would take an order, but just don't rush me.
There you go. See? Okay.
It took me a week to make that first successful bit. Well, both the one that I lost and the first one. It took me a week to make it. Now, I was doing other stuff, but the process actually carried on for a week because I've had to make the pieces and grind them, and they had to be annealed and then grind them and restack them and all that. It was it was about a week's process. Like I said, I was making other billets of steel during that time, so it wasn't that I devoted a whole week to it. But.
Right. No, the process is it's long. It's grueling.
Yes, it is.
So you brought up a couple things in that story which I wanted to touch on. One of which was, so you make steel for other people to make knives with, and you must have obviously pretty good working relationships with a lot of these knife makers. Is your exposure to some of your finished steel mostly in magazines? I mean, do you own any pieces of your steel that are made by other knife makers? How does that, it's just such an interesting, you make something for someone else to make something out of.
Right. So the question is, do I own knives made by other makers with my steel?
Yeah. Is that a thing? Do people send you the knives? Do you purchase your own steel back? How does that work?
I have several knives that are made out of my steel that were given to me by people by other makers who I've just became real good friends and decided they were just gonna send me a knife one day. I have a few. I don't have many like that, but I have probably 3 or 4.
Oh, okay. Wow.
But and I have a few of my own that I made out of my steel.
Nice.
But not very many of them either.
Is it hard to keep something like that for either financial reasons or you just rather just move on with it?
You mean as far as the knife that I make?
Yeah.
No, it's not really hard to part with it because bear in mind that I was a knife maker for a lot of years, and was not making Damascus, so I enjoyed making knives to sell, So when I make one now, it's not really hard to sell. I don't advertise that I have some for sale sometimes because I may sit on one for 6 months or so before I let anybody know I have it. Just because I don't have to. It's not, that's not the way I make my living now. Although, just a few years ago, I was actually in the process of trying to transition back to making knives. And the reason for that is I wanted to expand and do some different things in stainless Damascus that I knew nobody would be able to afford, but I could make my own knives out of it, and plus I miss making knives. I used to make I made straight knives for years, and I made folders for years, and I really miss making folders, but and one of the reasons I was going to transition back to making knives was the fact that I was having so much joint pain. This was about 3 or 4 years ago. The joint pain was getting extreme. To the point that it was, during the night I would wake up with my joints throbbing, and I was thinking, what, you're not supposed to get like that when you get older. It's just not supposed to be that bad.
And you say you don't have this from making Damascus?
No. Wow. After doing some research, doing a lot of research and listening to people who are, their approach to problems with your body is natural. And they say if you've got problems, there's an underlying. In other words, if you got, basically what you need to do is work on solving the problem instead of masking the symptoms or treating symptoms. You got to figure out what the problem is, and you won't have to worry about treating the symptoms. So anyway, basically what I did was just kept doing research, and this is the way I always do. I research everything until I find out what the cause is. Well, I was reading some stuff about gluten, and it turns out that gluten causes severe joint pain. So I said, well, I'm gonna try it, but it takes a while before it completely clears up. It takes a long time for it to get it out of your system. So I cut out all gluten. Matter of fact, I cut out all grain to start with. And after about 3 months, most of the joint pain was gone. And by the end of a year, I had no more throbbing joint pain. All of it was gone except maybe some pain from previous injuries or something in my wrist or in my shoulder. But I was in the shop, doing what I normally did without all that pain. And so I said, well, if I can keep doing this without hurting, I don't need to go back to making knives. Although I still try to make 2 or 3 knives a year and would like to make more, but just don't have the time. Everybody keeps me too busy.
Yeah, I mean wow. I mean that's great that you solve the problem in a natural way, so you don't have to.
I'd like to make it a point though. I think Mike is just built different because I could make knives day in and day out, and forging for 2 days straight, I hurt from head to toe.
Oh, really?
He says it's not natural to stand in front of a 2,300 degree furnace all day.
Yeah, no, it's not.
I end up hurting and severely dehydrated after I did a week straight of forging when I was learning, and I ended up just aching and severely dehydrated.
Yeah,
you're doing it.
Well, every year when summer rolls around, I always say, man, I hate summertime.
I did it in South Texas heat in the middle of July. It was not. It wasn't good.
Bad.
Yeah, I did it. You're familiar, Robert Carter?
Yes.
Yeah, so I did it with Rob, and I came from New York, went out there in July or August heat in Southeast Texas. Ooh, yeah, we were doing it outside, and there was points where we were doing 105 degree weather outside some of the days. Ugh. And I'm doing a billet, he's doing a billet, so we're alternating heats in the forge/press. And I'll do my heat, I'll press it out, throw it back in the oven on the forge, go do a lap in the pool, fully clothed, except my shoes, in socks, pants, everything. While I was getting back to temp, he's forging out, and we alternate. He jumps in the pool, I start pressing it, and then by the time you're done with your press, you're dry, and you go do it. You do the lap again. It was bad.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, it gets in the 90s here, and I'll be forging every day. Of course, now I don't forge every day now because I'm working alone now. For the last couple of years, I've worked by myself. I've always had help up until the last couple of years, but when I had a helper, I was forging every day, and he was doing the grinding, keeping metal sheared for me and stuff like that, So I don't forge every day now.
Do you mean like an apprentice, or you just mean like a helper?
Well, yeah, just a helper. I've had for about 20 years. I had somebody, not the same guy, but for a 20-year span, or maybe a little longer. I've been making steel 26 years. Probably 25 of those years I had probably 23 of those years I had a full-time helper. The last 2 years I've been by myself, and I've found that I'm more focused and don't make as many mistakes. And my brain seems to work better when I'm by myself. I've actually come up with some new ideas, new patterns, and I don't know exactly why that is, but by the way, I have to work harder and I have to work longer hours, but I love it. I really do. I love what I do.
So I mean, all these years forging, and you're just raring to go. You're looking to get out in the shop and just keep forging.
Oh yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
That's very commendable because from what I understand of forging it's hard and it's not easy on the body. But
Yeah.
it sounds like you're trucking right along. So I can't,
Yeah.
I won't second guess it.
I've always been small, but when I quit eating gluten, I lost 20 pounds in about 2 months, and that's 20 pounds I didn't need to lose. So I'm literally dried up to nothing now.
Uh-oh.
But I feel better,
See?
But I always tell people, now you know why I'm so small. I'm forging in the summertime in 95-degree heat every day.
Fire burns within. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, now you're saying, okay, you were saying that you're busy and you have been busy. So, just to be clear, so I mean, you're still all of the patterns that you've done over the years or that you offer now. Those are still available, and you just you take orders for those, or you list them on your website, or you just
no. I do everything by order.
Okay, wow.
I've had people, occasionally somebody will ask me if I've got a particular size or pattern in inventory, and because I do have a little inventory, here and there, but I usually don't have what people need. Sometimes I do, but anyway, I'll have people call me up and order a billet, and they'll say, can you ship it out tomorrow? And I'll say, no, I don't. I mean, I can. I don't have it. I have to make it. And delivery times usually run 60 days to sometimes 90 days, and they'll say, I thought you would have had it in stock. And I'll say, do you realize how many billets of steel I would have to have in stock if I had every size and every pattern that everybody wanted?
Right.
Hundreds
It's
and
not
hundreds.
possible.
Because some want 1/8 by 1.25 inches, some want 1/8 by 1.5 inches, 1/8 by 2, 3/16 by 1.5 inches, or 1.25 inches, or by 2, or 1 3/4 inches. I mean, there's no way that I could keep an inventory of every size and every pattern.
Yeah, it's just right. Too many, too much.
Especially being just one man.
Right. Exactly. Right. But I mean, that's kind of it's a material that is made by a man in a shop. It's not some synthetic that's poured, pressed, and cut. I mean, that's part of I think that's certainly part of the charm of the material itself, which is, somebody had to stand there and make this. It didn't just make itself, like,
That's true.
I mean, I love my Cardo, but it's just,
Yeah. I have, as I said before, I don't use a can. I don't can my Damascus. When I stack a billet, I wrap it. I wrap it in stainless foil. And that's how I start. I mean, I do the forge weld with it wrapped in stainless foil. Now, there is I can tell you this, canning it, by building a can and encasing it in a can, you have a lot more forgiveness. But I don't want to have to cut that.
Do you have to run air with? Because how I did it is I did it in a can and ran gas.
No.
So you don't actually need gas?
No.
Huh.
You really don't. What do you use? Argon?
Yeah.
Argon in your can?
Yep.
No, you don't need it. If there's no airspace in there, you don't need it. And even if there is a little bit of airspace, it's not going to be enough to
okay, so I'm interested about the foil method because so locally my buddy just got a 50-ton press, one of those McNabb presses.
Yes.
And he got a rolling mill, and I just wanted to go make some 5-layer San Mai, and I was just gonna weld up the entire perimeter because it's gonna be pretty thin using like 60 thou stock.
Yes.
But I want to try the packet. I mean the foil method. I didn't think that you could do that.
Well, now if you're using if you're going to stack a thin billet like you're talking about, and they're 5 layers at 60 thousandths, you'll be fine with just fusing the edges like you're talking about.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking about just using something thin, and then pretty much running it through the rolling mill to get an ounce of thickness, and then and just call it a day, because I'm just want to I want straight lines. I just want 5 different colors for contrast.
Yeah.
And it's a knife that it's compound ground with 3 bevels, so it should look pretty good for that material.
Yes. Yes, you would be better off. I mean, if it's not going to be any thicker than that, you'd be better off to do it like you were talking about doing it. My billets are 2 inches high at least. Well, they range anywhere from 3/4 to 2 1/4 high. So that size billet, I'll wrap it in foil. Now, the critical part about using foil is you have to have everything right with your forge. You've got to have really, really even heat. If you wouldn't think, when you look into a forge and you see it looks all one color, you wouldn't think that there can be cold spots in that forge. But if that forge has got, if the heat's not really, really even, the foil method, you'll lose it. You'll lose part of it. You may get half a good billet, but you're going to lose part of it if everything's not just right. So you got to really constantly keep an eye on your forge and make sure the lining in a forge getting a little bit out of whack from deterioration, can cause it can mess up your vortex in there and can cause cold spots, and there's so many things that can do it. As a matter of fact, I struggle with that as far as forges. I've tried many forges for years, built most of them, tried several that I bought, never liked any of them. Until just a few years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I came up with an idea for a forge, and I tried it, and man, that forge has been mostly maintenance free and has made my life a lot easier.
Yeah, it's pretty badass. Until you made that forge, I was always wondering, why don't guys modernize the forge and not just, instead of using KO wool and ceramic, why don't they just go heat treat oven build and just use full brick?
Yeah, exactly.
And it seemed easier to build too. Instead of, I hate dealing with KO wool, man. And that itchy, and then run Satanite, and then all the ceramic. I was like, why don't people just make one out of brick?
Yeah. Yeah, plus you're breathing. Yeah, plus you're breathing that stuff constantly. It's breaking down, it's blowing out into the air, and you're breathing it, and it can't be good for you.
Yeah, that doesn't sound healthy.
No, it's essentially glass. It's glass cotton is what it is.
Yeah. Actually, ceramic cotton.
That's probably even
worse.
That
stuff gets in your lungs. If it gets in your lungs, it's not going anywhere. It's going to stay there.
At one point, after messing around with it 2-3 years ago with Robert, because I have a lot of free space in my shop, and I was considering getting a press and doing it myself here and there. And then once I saw your forge, that was on the list. If I went that route, instead I decided to buy more CNC machines.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll revisit doing it in-house again at some point, but now that a local friend has the equipment, I'm gonna just ask him if I could pay him a day rate to rent out the machines.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll talk him into getting one of your forges, because I saw it at Blade Show after you made it. It was nice. Yeah. That thing was made even when you made it for sale, it was done professionally. The steel housing to encase everything, it was made to sell and not just for your home use.
Yeah, I've got it. I put a lot of time in one of those forges. I can tell you, they're not cheap, but I've got a lot of time in them, and it's built entirely by me. I build it each piece, every piece of it. I don't think it's that
expensive, because the forges that are out there, I think, are pretty cheap compared to heat treat oven. You look at the high end Paragons, and yours is still cheaper than the high end Paragon. Those newer black units with. So I don't think it's that expensive considering.
Yeah.
Well, see, that's good. That's value. That's what we're looking for. That's a good sell. Buy one of these forges.
When he first made them, he's like, they're going to be expensive, and there was no price for a month or two. And I'm thinking what's going to be? And then he came out to them. I'm like, no, it's pretty reasonable. It looks really nice. The burners, you don't have like the ribbon burners were the
Yeah.
most efficient before he came out with his system.
Yeah.
What I understood, and they were pretty pricey too. And then he
Oh,
has
yeah.
a whole different system, and it's
Yep.
already included. You don't have to deal with building a ribbon system.
Yeah, the one thing I've always been a stickler about a forge is I want even heat. That's why I came up with the idea of using the smaller burners and using a lot of them. You know, you're gonna get more even heat. And when I built that first forge, my gas bill dropped to $150 a month.
Okay, so
Yeah,
so the patterning, so we were talking about that for a little bit, and then the forging, is there a particular, and I mean I know you must probably get this all the time, but do you have a favorite pattern aesthetically, or do you have a favorite pattern that you like to make?
my favorite patterns aesthetically are not my favorite patterns to make because they're so time consuming and you
Never
gotta.
is.
Yeah, of course. My favorite pattern to make would be random.
Okay.
Because it's easy, you know.
Right.
But there again, I don't. You know, I've never liked doing easy stuff over and over. So I can't really say that random would be my favorite to make. But I like trying new stuff. I mean, heck, I don't know if I have a favorite pattern to make. Some of them are really a pain to get, you know, to the final process. So they're not really that fun to make.
Right. It's all an arduous process.
Yes.
Okay.
But I gotta
all
say,
right.
I think my favorite pattern aesthetically is the Fire Clone, or some of the variations of it. You know, and I've done quite a few variations of it that are you know, they all turn out nice. So now I have made some ugly Damascus before.
Oh, I don't believe it. What are you talking about?
I made a piece one time I had this idea, and so I said, let me try this. So I ended up making this piece of steel, and after I got it etched, I said, man, that is ugly. I mean, that is really ugly. So I just threw it in the scrap pile. That's the only time I really made what I thought was an ugly piece of steel. Aside from back, you know, years ago, I would when I first got started, I didn't, and you know, actually wasn't controlling my heat quite good enough, and occasionally would get a piece too hot, and it would be really, really grainy looking. I would scrap them too.
All right.
So I like
patterns are tricky, and choosing one child is always the hardest thing to do. That's
yes.
That could be said.
Yes, I'd also say that aesthetically, my the Turkish twist also, I really like it.
Okay, all right. Is it now? Okay, that's what about requests from makers? It sounds like Alan was twisting your ear for a few years for that Turkish twist. Is there another story that involves another maker just pestering you for something specific that you ended up doing?
Yeah, occasionally. I can't think of any right offhand, but occasionally somebody asked me to do something a little different. I mean, I just had a guy today ask me to do my Fire Clone 2 in a Sanmai. So now I have done Sanmai twist. So basically what I do is I do a right-hand twist billet and a left-hand twist billet. And then I sandwich a piece of XHP between those two after they're cleaned up. And that makes a unique pattern, but he's wanting me to do my Fire Clone that way. The Fire Clone 2. He's wanting me to do it that way as a Sanmai, you know, with the XHP core. So I told him I would do it, so that'll be the first one.
Wow. That's okay, that's a pretty intense piece of steel.
Yeah.
That's no joke. What's the largest piece of steel you've ever drawn out for Damascus? Like sword length, wakizashi length?
Yeah, I've done some. Oh, 30, 32, 34 inches maybe.
Okay, that's sizable.
That's about right.
That's okay. That's big. That's okay. Someone was into it. They were gonna make a full Damascus sword. That's the way to do it.
Yeah. Now I used to. I can't remember who I did that piece for, but it's been a while. But I couldn't surface grind it. I didn't have anything to surface grind anything that big. For a long time, 18 inches was as big as I could grind. But I've recently, let's see, about a year and a half ago, I added it was last year. Last year I actually added a 36-inch Blanchard. Started having problems with my 20-inch and been wanting to go to a bigger Blanchard anyway. So I ended up I found a real good deal on a Blanchard that had been kind of tucked away for a pretty good while. It came out of a GM plant. And I got it at a good price. Of course, I had to do a lot of work to get it cleaned up. Somebody had never washed the base of it out. It's like I think they decided to decommission it, and they used it for another year without ever cleaning the base of it out. So I spent 12 hours with an air hammer in the base of that thing, hammering all that solidified metal and dust off of the grinding stones. Mm-hmm. It had become like a brick, and I had to chisel all that stuff out of there. Man, I thought I'd never get done. Now that day, at the end of that day, I was hurting all over.
Yeah.
I just used one of those recently for the first time too on a piece of machinery I bought. I rented it. It's pretty neat. I didn't know those were a thing until I Googled it. But your whole body vibrates. It's like a mini jackhammer.
Yeah.
But, that and a needle scaler will also.
I used to use a needle gun on every billet to get the scale off.
Oh, okay, that makes
sense. Before I would start grinding it on the Blanchard. But I've got stones or segments for my Blanchard now that I don't have to remove any scale. These things are cut right through the scale, won't load the wheel up. I mean, they are nice.
Yeah, I was watching your process on restoring that. You were having some issues with the Blanchard at one point when you first got it. Yeah. And then you built that beast of a 50 horsepower phase converter.
Yes.
Yeah, I just built a 5 horsepower one this week for a surface grinder. It's the first time I had to do that. It's pretty neat.
Man, I learned a lot about electricity. I knew nothing about phase converter. I mean, I had used them. I had several in my shop, but I'd never built one. So I had to do a lot of research, and man, I spent more time researching than I actually did working on the thing. But I ended up getting it after blowing the transformer on the pole outside my shop 4 times.
Oh boy.
Nice.
That's fine.
When I went to Tatsuya, I didn't know how to deal with that. I wired my shop when I got it. There was not a single outlet. There was just one light bulb in the entire 2,000 square foot. So I wired the entire shop 220, everything from the panel out. So I learned a lot because I had to do it for New York City code because I had to get it inspected. So that taught me a lot, which is very helpful. So anytime I don't have to call an electrician every time I buy something or need an outlet. Yeah. Like my old shop.
Be an electrician.
It helps a lot, man. Calling an electrician to put in just one outlet is $100 or $120.
Oh yeah.
I have tons of outlets. Every other machine's 220. Anytime I buy a new machine, I don't have to hesitate. I'll get that thing running the same day. Electrical supplies down the block. But it was my first time figuring out how to convert into 3-phase with using a motor as a generator and calculating what you need. Yeah. When the first time I hooked it up, I kept blowing my breaker because I was looking at the ratings of the motor, and it's like, it's 15 amps. So I put a 30 amp breaker in there, and I'm like blowing it, and I realized, it's 15 amps at 3-phase, and this is not true 3-phase. So I had to upgrade to 40 amp, and then it worked. But I was like, what the hell's happening?
Yeah. My problem was I was trying to build this thing with capacitor start. I wanted to just hit the button and the thing start up. I didn't want to use a pony motor. And I actually had it successfully. I actually used it for like 2 weeks with a capacitor start. And I had 13 capacitors on the thing, 13 start capacitors. But the problem was, occasionally when I'd go to start it, there would be such a power surge, it would actually blow a capacitor, and the power would bypass. There would be so much surge of power, it would bypass my. I had a 125 amp breaker, but it was a time delay breaker. It was bypassing.
So it was pulling more than it was being fed.
Yeah, it was bypassing the breaker and going straight to the pole, and the fuse or the breaker, they call it the fuse. The fuse on the transformer was more sensitive and quicker acting than the 125 amp breaker that I had it hooked to. So it would blow that fuse, and I'd have to call the power company, and they have to come out and work on it. And after about 4 times, the guy said, okay, you're going to have to do something a little different. And I said, yeah, I know. I got the solution.
In New York City, they wouldn't let me do that. If I did that once, I'm like, if you don't call a licensed person, we're going to find you.
Oh, yeah.
So everything I do, I have to do by the book, and then call my electrician. It's like, hey, does this make sense? He's like, yeah, it seems safe. You could do it.
Yeah. Hey, it was pretty wild. Here you can do your own electrical work. You don't have to have an electrician. Now, if you're in a commercial setting where you would. But anyway, when he told me that, I said, look, I've already got it figured out. I know what I'm going to have to do. So I went to a pony motor. So I actually started with a pony motor now, and I've had no more issues. Just completely eliminated the start capacitors. But I had all 3 legs of that phase converter balanced to within 7 amps. Wow. 7 volts. Within 7 volts.
On the money. That's the trick. Yeah. No,
that ain't bad. That ain't bad.
Yeah, I still have to test mine because I'm curious to see how much it's pulling.
Yeah.
Because both my CNCs run off single phase, so it's pretty much the Haas Mini Mill is the biggest one I could get.
Yeah.
But the next one is gonna be 3 phase because it's gonna have a 20 horsepower motor. Yeah. And I'll have to either buy or build a 40 horsepower unit. I'll probably just buy the panel and then just get a motor separately.
Yeah. That's the easiest thing to do.
Yeah, for that, because I need a CNC balanced, so I don't really want to build one. The 5 horsepower one, it's for a surface grinder, so it wasn't as finicky to build it. So I'll have to mess around with that, but I'll have to call the power company, because apparently not every electrical line is set up to be converted for such. Like, for the 5 horsepower, it's fine, but when my buddy got a CNC, well, not buddy, he's just someone I talked to, he got a CNC, and he was planning to put on a phase converter, and the electrical company is like, no, you can't do that because the line that comes to your house won't have enough power to convert it. So he was running his CNC off a generator for like 2 months, from what I understand, until they actually brought him a peg of 3 phase just inside his whole building.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah, you can't just convert it if the line won't let you convert it, which I didn't know about. So it's something I'll have to look into before buying a CNC.
Well, it's just part of the fun of doing everything yourself, man.
Yeah, it is. See, where I'm at. I'm out in the country. I live in the middle of nowhere. So I couldn't even get an electrician to work on the thing for me, to try to put. I bought the parts and the components and couldn't even get an electrician to hook it up. That's why I decided to do it myself. I finally got one that said he would do it. He would help me build or basically build the thing for me. And he said, now when you need it? And I said, now. He said, no, it's going to be a month before I can get to it. I said, that's all right, I'll do it myself. So that's when I started researching and ended up building it myself.
Well, sometimes that's the best way to do it, you know?
Yes, it is.
When time is of the essence, you just got to jump into it. And a lot of people in that position, you've already taught yourself to do so many things. So, being an electrician is, whatever. Just teach yourself. Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah. And that's one thing I never wanted to be, was an electrician. Never wanted anything to do with it.
Well, It ended up coming around.
Yeah, things change.
So all these years forging Damascus, and you're still enjoying it just as much as you ever have, but you are trying to make, you're trying to get back into regular knife making, but you're saying that you don't always have these knives available, right? It's kind of something that you'll hold on to for a little bit there.
Yes, usually. Yeah. I really don't try to sell them. I don't advertise them. I will put one on my Instagram page occasionally, but I just don't advertise them for sale. But somebody always comes up, and when they find out I got it, they always buy it, so and I really like making integrals out of stainless Damascus. That's when I quit making knives, I was making a lot of folders, and I really enjoyed the folders. But I really really enjoy making the integrals out of stainless Damascus, because there's not very many of them out there. You don't see that many of them, and it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work. But it's rewarding when you get one done. So.
And for listeners,
really
he's talking about folders, but when he's talking about integrals, he's talking about a one-piece fixed blade where the bolsters and if there's a rear bolster or whatever, however he does it, it's all one piece, and he's not putting those on after.
That's correct.
Which are pain. I've always wanted to do one. I would have probably approached them more like in machining fashion, where I start with a thick one and machine out all the guts, or maybe forge it. But I wanted to start. I wanted to always just machine it all away, and then do it that way.
Yeah. The only thing, the problem with making integrals out of Damascus is you need a thick enough billet. If you got a thick enough billet, you got to make sure that your pattern, you need to start out with at least half inch thick. Well, so you got to pattern a piece that's an inch thick to get a half inch piece that's cleaned up, so that's usually not very easy to do, especially in stainless. Now, if you do it out of a twist billet, that's not that much of a problem, because you can twist it and forge it and leave it the thickness that you need to make the whole thing out of. But there again, if it's a half inch thick and you've got to leave material for your bolsters, then once you get the blade ground down, the thickness it needs to be, then you've lost a lot of your pattern. So that's the hardest part about making integrals, is getting the pattern that's good to look good. Now you can do an ingrain forging, like you would do a feather pattern. That's basically an ingrain forging. Now you could do that and draw it out, and the pattern's going to be the same all the way through. Or another example would be a Turkish twist. When you slab a piece of, after you get the final pieces welded together on a Turkish twist, when you could slab them off, you could have a piece thick enough to do, an integral, and no matter how much you grind off the blade, it's going to look the same.
So a huge amount of material, and you're trying to make a hard-to-make folder in integral, and then you're trying to make a hard-to-make folder out of impossible to make Damascus. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're choosing the easy route there, obviously, guy. Huh? You're just trying to get out of it without any work. I see.
Yeah.
That's okay. All right. So once in a while, when you get when you get a hair or something, you're time to make some folding integrals out of stainless Damascus. Wow. That's a lot of work, man. That's So we're talking about like once or twice a year. So what does your show circuit look like? I mean, you must go to Blade Show, right?
That is the only show I do.
So okay, that makes it easy. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
I was well, I used to do a lot of shows when I was making knives. But after I started making Damascus, and when, by 97, when I was so swamped with orders, I really didn't see the need to do all those shows. So I just kind of stuck to the Blade Show every year. The Blade Show, by the way, for a Damascus maker, the Blade Show is going to be the best show out there anyway, because there's more makers there than any other show. So, you're gonna be in contact with more makers there than you would at a 100 table show.
Now, would you bring billets with you to Blade Show for sale or for show?
Oh yes.
Okay. All right.
Yes, I'll usually have a table full.
Okay, that works.
And I usually make see a lot of times over the years, throughout the year, people order a piece of steel, and then I'll take what I've cut off of that billet and stick it back in my inventory pile. So when I go to Blade, then I'll have a lot of that inventory, and then I'll also make some big whole special billets for the Blade Show. So I usually have a lot of steel on the table.
Okay, so you travel light. I like that. Okay, that's good. How do you get all that steel from Kentucky to Atlanta? That's okay. Bad question.
Yeah, it's not. I don't have that much.
Okay.
I mean, I've just put it all in one box, and of course, it's not a cardboard box.
Right.
I can put it all. I've got a gun case that I can usually fit. Well, actually, I got two gun cases.
Okay, two gun cases.
One that's not the rifle type cases, but the shorter one. One's about 18 inches long. I got one about that long, and then a shorter one that's about 14 inches. And I usually have both of those about full.
Okay.
They're super heavy though.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Oh man.
You take that to the UPS store, and they're just like,
yeah,
what
you can't carry it around. I have to use a little hand truck to get it in and out.
Okay, all right. Weighs a lot. But on the other hand, it's inventory that you can't break, so it's not like it's going to show up broken. It's totally
That's
fine.
Right.
It's relatively indestructible, in fact.
Yep.
So okay, so you do Blade Show. And because if you don't go to Blade Show, people basically think that you might have passed on. So you have to. Everybody's got to go to Blade Show. That's it.
Everybody always looks for me at Blade Show. Yeah.
Okay. But you're staying up to date with the kids. So you've got an Instagram that you post on.
Yes.
And a fully functioning website.
The website needs some work. I've had it for a long time, and I just need to work on it. But I mean, I've got new patterns, and but it seems like everybody knows what I got because they see it on Instagram every time somebody makes a knife out of a new piece of steel that I've made. They post it, so then I start getting calls.
I mean, that's the best advertising. That's it.
Oh yeah.
Somebody else makes something, and then they're like, "Oh man, I got to have some of that steel," and they come to you.
Yeah. Yep.
That works. So I mean, what's well, I guess there was no Blade Show this year, but there's gonna be a Blade Show next year. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's gonna happen.
Yeah. The most epic of all the Blade shows.
Most likely.
Yeah. So I mean, Mike, what's your orders look like now? Are you a few months out? Can people can still place orders all the time anyway, right?
Oh yeah. I'm probably at least right now maybe 2.5 months out. I've got some big orders. Usually when somebody wants 1 or 2 bars, I'll try to work it in when I'm doing some of the bigger orders. I make steel for William Henry. Make steel for, I've got a customer in China that usually orders 20 to 25 bars at a time. I've got, let's see, several other people. Let's see. Oh yeah. Got a company I make some really thin material for cigar cutters. It's 60 thousandths thick. Man, it is a pain to grind. I mean a pain, because When the thinner it is, when you get thin like that, it doesn't want to stick to the chuck as good. So you got to block it. So you got to block it with thin stuff also to keep it from slinging it off the chuck when you're grinding it. So it can be a pain. Plus, when you're forging thin stuff, the thinner you get, the more of a pain it is to forge because the heat dissipates quick. So, patterning this stuff, drawing it out into stuff into something that thin and patterning it and then grinding it, yeah, it can be a pain. But anyway, I've been doing a lot of stuff for them.
That's neat. I did not know you did that for the cigar cutters. It'd be cool as heck with some Damascus on it.
Yep. The company used to be called Zycar.
Oh, okay.
They sold out and they're actually, I think they still use that name, but the company that bought them out is Quality Importers.
Okay.
And they've moved their office to Florida. It's not in Kansas City anymore.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'm familiar with Zycar. Okay, I'll have to look into that because that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm looking at it as a car lighter and cutter as we speak.
That's pretty dope. That's just as a close to the end wrap up question. That's a good one. What are some? I mean, that's a cigar cutter, so it's in the knife realm. Are there other orders or items that you get requests for that are outside of the knife realm entirely, just cosmetic pieces?
Yes, I have people I make ring stock for. Occasionally, they make wedding bands and stuff like that out of them. And I've got some other people that use them for different types of jewelry. But most of anything outside the knife realm is usually for ring stock. And I've made several rings myself. It's kind of intriguing. But
guess that would make sense. Yeah, like round stock.
Yeah, well, you're kind of limited. If you do round stock, you're kind of limited in your patterns. So what I do is make a flat billet wide enough so they can cut the ring out of it. And when you look at the edge, you'll see, I try to pattern it so there'll be a unique pattern on the edge. So once you make the ring out of it, you're seeing the edge pattern. Instead of like the face pattern on the face of a billet. You can get some really unique patterns that way. A lot more interesting than you can get in a round stock,
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? Round stock, you're meant to see the face of it, not the edge. Okay, that's pretty cool. All right, very cool. Is there anything that we haven't gone over that you wanted to go over?
I don't know. I guess that pretty much does it. The one thing that I would like to say is my inspiration these days comes from all of you guys out there making knives. Because every time I see a new piece of my steel or a different piece of my steel on some of these phenomenal knives that these guys are making, it just gives me that much more incentive, because I know that that's a part of me that is it's gonna be here when I'm long gone. It's a part of me that people can enjoy for many, many years, and that's what inspires me, and that's what makes me what I am.
The knives that people make in this industry or anybody that, right, the item will outlast all of us. It will be
absolutely
generations and generations gone, and someone will be holding one of these custom knives in their hands, and they'll be inspired or in awe at the artistry and craftsmanship that goes into, everything that they're holding in front of them. The steel, the whole package. So that's excellent inspiration. That's tugging at the heartstrings of makers out there, guys. Keep making awesome stuff with this Damascus. That's good. Okay, all right. Well, I think that's a great point to wrap on, Mike. I want to thank you so much for taking time tonight and sitting down and talking with us about making steel and hammering and techniques. I think this is informative for someone, looking towards forging and somebody interested in the forging arts, as well as to get a background on what you do and who you are. So I want to thank you for taking time.
Oh, glad to do it, man. Glad to do
Yeah,
it.
thanks, Michael. It was a good episode.
Very cool.
Very
Yes, sir.
informative.
Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I definitely learned a lot.
Yeah. On that note, I'm gonna sign off. I'm gonna say thanks everybody for listening. This has been another episode of the Bladeology podcast. This is Jeremiah Burbank from PVK Vegas, and I'm signing off.
It's Nick Chuprin of NCC Knives, and I'm signing off.
Oh, I should know if Blade works. Good night, everybody.